2015, La Boca, Chile, a small town where the Rappel River meets the Pacific Ocean. It's home to about 700 people, and it's a quiet, peaceful place where fishermen catch strong winds out to sea and go fishing off the coast. Maybe they catch a little Chilean jack mackerel or some sea bass. As for 91-year-old Estela Melendez, she didn't often leave land. With her age, her difficulty hearing, and a gait hindered by arthritis, but on top of this, she also carried something that not many of us ever would. Something that not many of us have even heard of. In Estela's twilight years, she would regret one of very few things. She and her husband were unable to have children. She said, "We suffered tremendously because of this reason." Her husband of 74 years, Manuel Gonzalez, had been, like many in the area, a fisherman and boat operator in town. Manuel sadly passed away in January 2015. A few months after his death, Estela suffered a fall and was taken to the doctors. There, during an x-ray, they discovered an anomaly in her abdomen. At first, they believed it was a tumor and they would have to operate, but a second x-ray was ordered, and the doctors could not believe what they were seeing. They discovered something only documented about 330 times throughout the course of 400 years of medical documentation. It was a calcified fetus. It weighed 4.4 pounds. More accurately, it's a lithopedion, from the Greek words lithos, meaning stone, and paidon, meaning child. So this happens when the embryo implants, grows, and then dies inside the abdominal cavity outside of the uterus. It's then too large to be absorbed by the body, so it then calcifies. The chance of ectopic pregnancies occurring is about 2% of all pregnancies. That's when the fetus grows outside of the uterus. And on top of that, the chance of them calcifying in the way it did for Estela accounts for about 0.005% of all gestations. Marco Vargas Lazo, the director of the hospital where Estela had gone, called the case extraordinarily rare. And he said the fetus was, quote, large and developed and occupied all of her abdominal cavity. She said she had noticed the lump on her belly for years, but didn't think much of it. It hurt at times, but was mostly just an uncomfortable lump. While this condition can be life-threatening, what makes Estela's case even more rare is that she carried this calcified fetus for over 60 years. Doctors considered surgically removing the mass, but ultimately decided against it. They figured that operating on a 91-year-old patient was far riskier than doing nothing at all. So the calcified fetus simply remained inside of her. And after everything, Estela said that the lump reminded her of her husband and the child they would never be able to have. Welcome to Do Geese See God, a palindrome turned podcast where I cover true stories, bizarrities, wonders, and folklore from across the world and back. And this episode marks a momentous occasion because this is the very first episode, and I've been working very hard to bring this to you guys, and I'm very happy to finally get this off the ground. And for this first episode, I wanted to share you my list of goals that I have for this show. This is what I want to do. This is my mission statement. So here we go. Strap in. With this show, I plan to single-handedly dismantle the manosphere, overthrow domestic and global fascism, reverse climate change, purge political corruption, eradicate systemic racism, destroy cynicism, spread enlightenment, sow love and mercy, and reconstruct the universal language of empathy for all living things. Did I bite off more than I could chew? Possibly. But if I don't complete every single last thing I just listed, I will consider myself a failure. So we have some time. This is just through the length of the show. I hope I can complete all of these. But welcome. I'm your host, Austin Lee, and I was born December 21st, 1992 at 2:02 a.m. And my mother was in labor for 6 hours. So shout out to my mom. Without her, none of this would exist. And I'm also introducing a very dear friend of mine today. He is behind the cameras. We've known each other since kindergarten. We roomed together in college. This is my dear friend, Robert.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
He is just going to be a disembodied voice because I'm an egomaniacal narcissist and I need both of the cameras on me at all times. So we're not showing him. And also a very special guest who does get to be on camera, my dog, Jaye, but she won't have a speaking role. Before I get too deep into this one, I do want to say thank you for tuning in. Go subscribe on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, over on YouTube, wherever. I'm also launching a Patreon, which I'll talk more about that at the bottom of the episode, but we'll be doing some fun stuff over there as well. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. It means so much. All your support has been great. So moving on. Those of you who already know me, you're very used to hearing me talk about things like death, darkness, despair, destruction. But for this one, for my first episode, we're going to shake things up a bit. And the rest of this episode, we're going to mostly be talking about life and being brought into the world of the living. I also kind of want to dedicate this show to my dear friends, Mike and Allie, who they are expecting their first child this year. And shouts out Mike and Allie. Mike, also a dear friend of mine. We were in a band together back in the day. He actually, along with my other friend Matt, we were all in a band. They have been doing the music for this show, and I'm very grateful for them as well. So shout out to Mike and Allie. Allie, you might not even want to listen to this episode because it's a bit bizarre. It might stress you out a little bit. But hey, maybe my calming, relaxing tone might offset that a bit. But we're going to be focusing on birth because in a way, this is the birth of the show. This is the first episode, if you will. And we're going to cover the strangest journeys of childbirth, all that I could find. We did some crazy research for this one, and just how the way we enter this world is often complex and confusing. Sometimes it's tragic, but also sometimes it's incredibly miraculous. I'll also try and touch on some peculiar ways in which we've tried to control the ways in which we're brought into this world, including things like superstition and even things like just straight up magic. But before we get into these next couple stories, which in my opinion are some of the craziest birth stories ever, and I'm not just saying that, we're just going to run through this rapid fire segment because I came across so much crazy stuff while researching this episode. I felt like I couldn't give up just a few of these things. So 3, 2, 1, blast off. About 4 babies are born every single second on the planet Earth. And at least 4 babies have been born inside a McDonald's or in the parking lot of a McDonald's. Only 11 people have been born in Antarctica. The first was Emilio Marcos Palma in 1977, and all of these births were all strategized by either the Argentinian or Chilean governments to try and stake a claim for controlling the continent, which is why I've decided I'm going to send my future pregnant wife to Mars when the time comes so my child can be the first Martian and also take title as king or queen of Mars. Between 1928 and 2018, there were 74 infants born on 73 commercial flights. By that math, we're dealing with at least one set of twins there. This next one's crazy. Indigenous women in the Andes have given birth at extremely high elevation, approaching 15,000 feet. And they've been doing this about 12,000 years ago. The Andean women, unlike non-native women, developed physiological adaptations like increased uterine artery blood flow and higher oxygen delivery. This let them deliver babies in low oxygen environments. So they're literally built different. NASA doesn't allow pregnant astronauts into space because of the hostile environment, quote unquote, for human biology. This includes microgravity, higher radiation exposure, and limited medical infrastructure. But this begs the question, what do future deliveries even look like once we go into space and begin to colonize the moon and planets beyond Earth? But that might be a question for an entirely different episode. So with all that said, Here are some of the wildest stories of women giving birth all across the world. And this next one, to me, is incredible. I have been waiting to cover this one for a very long time. It comes across almost as mythology, even though it only took place a few decades ago. So just strap right in. The turn of the century. Jaye, Mozambique, a rural village 100 miles north of the capital, Maputo. It had downpoured for months. 22-year-old Carolina Cecilia Chirinza, who was also reported as Sofia Pedro, lived in this region, and she worked her own farm. She was also a pregnant mother of 2. She watched as the black storm clouds drifted on the horizon of the tropical arid region, and the heaviest storms had begun a few months earlier in October 1999. This months-long downpour would let up for only a moment and then return with a vengeance. Some areas saw a year's worth of rainfall in only 2 weeks, and locals hadn't seen storms like this in nearly 50 years. Many weren't even old enough to remember. By the end of January 2000, the onslaught of rain had caused the Komati, the Umbaluzi, and the Limpopo rivers to spill over their riverbanks. The Limpopo reached nearly twice its normal levels within the river valley. By late February, the rising water levels had displaced 500,000 people, possibly more, and this included Carolina and her family, her 5-year-old daughter Selena, and her 3-year-old son Bene. Sometimes they called him Benito. They lived on their farm nearly a mile away from the Limpopo River, but they weren't out of reach for what was to come. On February 27th, oddly, it was a generally clear day, the sun was out, but those brackish waters soon came flooding in. Carolina recalled, quote, "By the time I gathered the children in some clothes, it was too late. We were surrounded." So Carolina, at 9 months pregnant, ran with her family to higher ground. Some of her neighbors had already fled there. Some had even climbed a tall tree. And as the brown water came closer, she lifted her children up to the neighbors in the tall branches, and she pulled herself up behind them. Her aging aunt Olinda and her mother-in-law Rosita also joined them up in the tree. 15 people in total. Carolina watched as the water drowned their 4-acre farm of corn and beans. The very few belongings she also had vanished, including a table, 2 beds, all her cooking pots, a suitcase, a large bag of rice, and the tools she used on her farm. Carolina knew that economically, she was ruined. Her family wouldn't be able to make money until the floodwaters receded and a new planting season began. Her husband would also struggle, since he spent much of his time in the capital Maputo, where he sold cigarettes and candy for cash. It wasn't enough to provide for the whole family, and on top of that, portions of the capital where he had worked had also flooded. But these were all problems for another day, because surviving was now the goal. Floodwaters inched toward their tree filled with stinging ants, wasps, mosquitoes, and even snakes, and these flood conditions soon caused a spread of malaria and diarrhea across the entire region. Carolina's aunt, Olinda, caught malaria during this time. Carolina and the others tied her children onto the branches, securing them with blankets and clothes they had managed to grab before running to high ground. Hours passed, and then night came. The water showed no signs of receding. It continued to rise, even reaching the trunk of the tree, and there were no rescue teams in sight. The next day also came and went. Many complained of hunger and thirst, and as the water continued to make its way several feet up the tree trunk, there were still no signs of help coming. Carolina could not see land in any direction she looked, and she said, "We thought the water was going to take us." Other trees in the area were also filled with survivors, and one reportedly held 30 people. Others found their way onto unstable metal rooftops, some of which collapsed. Seeing as the water was not letting up, the younger men climbed further up the tree and began snapping off as many branches as they could to get a better view of the skies. They all watched as helicopters and airplanes passed over them, and the men began waving their shirts to try and get their attention, but none came for help. They passed over, back and forth, because they were simply rescuing others. The Mozambique government didn't have nearly enough resources and aerial rescue vehicles to accommodate everyone who needed help, so they even requested international help. Meanwhile, Carolina, her family, and her neighbors waited even longer. The floodwaters began to smell like sewage. Carolina saw plastic drums, timber, and dead cows, goats, and chickens floating by. She said she didn't see any human bodies, luckily, although others said that they did. No one dared to drink the water, understanding that it would obviously make them sick, and those who attempted to swim from the tree couldn't get very far because the current was just too strong. With the lack of food and fresh water, many in the tree, including Carolina, felt faint as the days went on. She also said people were so weak, it was like they were drunk. On Tuesday, February 29th, Carolina's elderly aunt, Olinda, who had contracted malaria, grew very weak, and she actually fell down into the waters below. A few of the younger men jumped in to save her, and when they got her back into the tree, they tied her to a branch to secure her, just as they had done with the children. Tuesday came and went, with the rescue helicopters running back and forth off in the distance, and after nightfall, Olinda untied her bindings, and she actually fell into the water again. Although, unfortunately, this time, they could not save her. She completely disappeared into the dark waters. As the family grieved their loss, Carolina felt the first wave of constricting pain in her abdomen. She was in labor. Thirsty, hungry, and weak, she tried her best to sleep through the night between the throbbing pains, only dozing off at the very best, and she had to listen to the waters surging only 6 feet beneath her. After a long and arduous night, the sun rose on March 1st, and by daybreak, Rosa Tavane, who was Carolina's mother-in-law, had placed a blanket beneath her for comfort and secured her to the branch with another blanket. They called her Rosita as an endearing nickname. If you know, Ito and Ita at the end of names is a sign of affection, and many in Mozambique speak Portuguese where this is common. So she's Rosa, she's Rosita. Rosita then sat on a branch just beneath Carolina. She braced Carolina's legs and held a blanket beneath her to ensure that the baby, who was about to come, wouldn't fall down into the waters. Carolina then forced the child from her womb. It was a daughter, and she cut the umbilical cord as they clung to the tree branches. As the child first began to scream, born into an absolute world of chaos, the beating propeller of a South African Air Force helicopter drowned out her screams. It descended upon the tree where Carolina said she was afraid of this helicopter since the gusts of wind it produced were so strong. She thought it would cause them all to fall in the water. A South African medic named Godfrey rappelled down to the branches below, and he lifted Carolina, her family, and her newborn to safety. They were flown to Chibuto, a town on a bluff safe above the floodplain, one of the very few sanctuaries in the area. Carolina said that her legs felt as rubbery as her newborn's, and when they wheeled her into the maternity ward, a nurse stood with a clipboard registering all the incoming patients. She asked Carolina what her daughter's name was, and she told her Rosa, after the child's grandmother who had helped Carolina give birth in one of the most complex deliveries, in my opinion, in human history. And when reporters asked her for a comment, all she could muster was, "I'm so happy." During the 2000 Mozambique floods, over 700 people are estimated to have died, but one, at least, was born into it. Carolina later said, "It's really a miracle because I wasn't the only one to go through this situation and to have lost so many of my belongings. The difference is that I myself have gained something and the other ones have not gained anything." After this, Rosita was seen by the world as a quote-unquote miracle baby. This story of Rosita's birth caught the world's attention and helped raise funds for thousands of survivors. In July of that year, the mother and daughter both traveled to the U.S. to actually speak in front of Congress to help raise awareness. But unfortunately, the area would flood again in 2013, claiming 113 more lives. The village of Chakwe would then implement an urban resilience plan, which meant rebuilding what was destroyed, as well as preparing their infrastructure for future floods. This region of Mozambique is constantly hit by cyclones. that displace millions and cuts off healthcare and water supplies. As for Rosita, Mozambique President Daniel Chapo described her as a symbol for girls in their country. Even though she was spotlit by the president, according to her family, they never received the Mozambique government support that they were offered. This included a scholarship for Rosita to study petrochemical engineering. Just a few years ago, Rosita went on to become a mother of her own and gave birth to a daughter when she was just 20 years old. Sadly, this year, at the age of 25, the family confirmed Rosita had been hospitalized for 2 weeks, and she actually ended up dying from the blood disorder anemia. She had also contracted tuberculosis. Since Hospital Rural de Chibuto didn't have any blood in storage, her family had desperately asked strangers to donate blood while she was ill, but many asked to be paid in return. Her parents ended up buying the blood, but in the end, Rosita never got better. Her death really has put a spotlight on the poor health system in Mozambique, which is a system that is very short of basic pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, and personnel. And reportedly, the mayor of Chibuto said efforts were being made with the family to formalize funeral arrangements, and he claimed that the municipality would take care of the funeral costs. But Rosita left behind a daughter who is just about to start school this year. If being born in a tree on the third day of a great flood isn't a miraculous birth of biblical proportions, I really don't know what is. And then opposite that, to die so young after being labeled a miracle baby is both very human and very tragic. If this story of Rosita moved you in any way, please go check out Doctors Without Borders and consider donating. They really do great work providing care all across the world, especially places like Mozambique, where there are simply not adequate resources and personnel. So moving on from that incredibly complex story, I hope everyone listening to this show knows the ins and outs of conception and how to make a baby. Robert, do you know how babies are made?
Yeah, I think so. Something about something going in and out, right?
That's it. That's it. Robert, you cheeky dog. You cheeky dog. But yeah. That's the birds and the bees, things going in and out. That's about it. But thankfully, modern medical science has explained an incredible amount about conception and the fine details. And across time, we have really tried our best to control conception, gestation, and the delivery process. Today, we can do things like freeze eggs, donate sperm, artificially inseminate, get vasectomies, thank God, get IUDs, have regimented dietary and exercise plans for pregnant women, and not to mention, almost all births here in the U.S. do take place in a hospital with medical professionals. How much more intervention could you really ask for? There is just quite a lot of things we try and do when it comes to our reproduction, and plus, we still hold on to a lot of the superstitions that have been passed down throughout the generations, especially for trying to determine the sex of the baby. Like if the woman is carrying quote unquote high means it's a girl, but carrying low means it's a boy. Or if you dangle a ring or a needle on a string above the belly, if it spins, it's a girl, but if it swings, it's a boy. Or some people think that the rotation tells you the sex of the child. Or if you crave sweets, it's a girl. Salty and sour things, it's a boy. If you eat garlic and the smell comes through your pores, it's a boy. The list really goes on because we're very invested in this. This is what it's all about, bringing life into the world. Or not. Doesn't have to be what it's all about, but it's certainly exciting and we want to understand it. And when we can't really understand it, we rely on intuition, on faith. But the further back you go, the crazier it gets, because before proper medical science and access to modern healthcare, we almost always had to address pregnancy and childbirth with vibes. And just hear me out. In the book, Get Me Out, A History of Childbirth from the Garden of Eden to the Sperm Bank, Dr. Randy Hutter Epstein brings up a slew of strategies used back then. In some ancient births and folklore medicine, people looking to conceive were advised that they needed to orgasm at exactly the same time in order to make a baby. In one guidebook, men who wanted boys had to drink red wine that was spiked in dried, pulverized rabbit's wounds. Women were advised to drink red wine mixed with desiccated rabbit's testicles. Other ancient guides advised that pregnant women should drink red wine, but not too much. They should also have sex while pregnant, but again, not too much. They needed sex because a, quote, splash of sperm moistens the womb, and too much sex would wear out their reproductive organs. One guide mentioned that's why, quote, whores have so seldom children because satiety gluts that womb. Very antiquated opinions here, but before scientific explanations, many relied on superstition because that's all they had to go on. And even now, like I was saying, there is still this mix of superstitions, customs, and science. If you go back through the first millennia or so, women strictly had to rely upon traditions that had been passed down for generations. They tried to speed up labor with herbal concoctions. They avoided spicy foods. Pregnant women were ordered to think happy thoughts, to have happy babies, and they would avoid looking at ugly things to avoid making ugly babies. There was a fear that extreme distress and anguish could cause physical defects, and this is kind of known as what's called maternal impressions. Like if the mother touched blood while she was pregnant, the child would be born with a birthmark. Or if the mother was scared by a hair, the child would be born with a cleft lip. Or if you eat eggs, the baby would come out and be bald. In France, pregnant women were told not to leave the house at night because if they looked up at the moon, their baby would become a lunatic or a sleepwalker. We still hold on to some of these old ideas, like pregnant women avoid looking at fire, they avoid attending funerals, sitting on a doorstep, avoid knitting, avoid sewing, avoid crossing your legs, avoid cold water. I swear to God, those are all things I found that people still do to this day because of superstition. But if you go back to the 16th century, Caterina de' Medici, she was the Queen of Italy back then, and she was trying to get pregnant. Her folk healer told her to drink mare's urine. She was also advised to soak her, quote, source of life. Some think that is code word for her reproductive organs. And she was supposed to soak it in a sack of cow manure mixed with ground stag's antlers. The king was apparently never attracted to his wife, and who knows, that smell might have contributed, but a doctor later diagnosed the royals with, quote, physically defective reproductive organs. Somehow he proposed a cure, and they went on to have 9 children. It's unknown what his cure was, if anything, but apparently the queen also ordered her servant to drill a hole in the floor so she could watch her husband have sex with his mistress. She was curious how the baby-making process even happened. So this might have helped with future conceptions because the poor woman just might not have known how to have sex. The famous Greek physician Soranus, around the year 100 CE, wrote a book on gynecology that was used for 1,000 years. The beginning was mostly matchmaking advice, where he instructed men on how to choose a partner to reproduce with. He suggested that women should be cheerful and not mannish or flabby. A woman who digests food easily should be chosen, and a woman who doesn't have chronic diarrhea. He also mentioned that constipation could suffocate the fetus and that diarrhea would wash the pregnancy away. He said that women who had chronic bowel issues would never be able to, quote, lay hold of the seed injected into them. As for drinking, Soranus suggested that a little was good. Too much was bad, especially because growing babies were molded by the pregnant woman's thoughts. So if she were to get drunk and have weird fantasies while conceiving, the child would be born strange. He claimed there was proof of this when one pregnant woman thought about monkeys while she was having drunk sex, so her child was born very hairy. In another tale, a man from Cyprus made his wife, who he claimed was not very good looking, stare at a beautiful statue while they tried to conceive. Their children then turned out to be gorgeous. To assist in childbirth, some medieval women used verbal charms, prayers, ligatures, amulets, as well as physical gestures and sequences of actions utilizing special objects, or really just in other words, they were using magic. These forms of religious magic circulated through medieval English society for over 6 centuries. Many believed in birthing girdles, which were talismans meant to soothe and calm pregnant women, especially when the maternal impressions concept was very popular. These girdles were sheepskin parchments that had symbols of divinity on them, and they were wrapped around the pregnant woman's belly. The images and writing on them combined prayers to saints, images of Christ's wounds or crosses, and verbal guarantees of safe delivery for both the mother and the child. Many of these types of folk medicine beginning in the Middle Ages involved what are called charms, and these involved objects, procedures, and incantations. And beginning with early pagan religions, the mothers would invoke the names of pagan gods. But as Christianity took over these pagan religions throughout Europe, those names turned into saints and biblical figures. And in England and Scotland, they had verbal charms for things like speedy deliveries, which would be fastened to the woman's knee. Sacred names were also chanted to protect the newborn from danger. Even Christ's command from the Bible, Lazarus come forth, was adapted as a verbal charm to summon a stuck infant out of the womb. What's cool is that one verbal charm to assist in childbirth was actually a palindrome. This was called the Satyr Square or Rotas Square, and it contains 6 words, 5 letters each. It goes Satyr, Arepo, Tenet, Opera, Rotas. Satyr, which is Latin for cedar, Arepo, which is an unknown word, Tenet, which is Latin for to hold, Opera, which is Latin for work, pains, labor, Rotas, which is Latin for wheels. So what does this all translate to? Generally, it's understood to mean the sower, Arepo, holds with care the wheels. While the church generally frowned upon charms like these when they were pagan devices, they were eventually okay with them as long as they involved saints and biblical figures. The church basically sanctioned magical charms to entice more pagans to convert. These types of talismans and charms were later forbidden by Christian reformists because they were considered magic, or at least close enough to it. The crazy part is that these all weren't some secret magical rituals used by underground witch covens. They've been documented for centuries, like I said, 6 centuries at least, and they were used by many, many people. Peasant women used them. They were also found on monks' prayer rolls, and they were even found inside physicians' written prescriptions. So this really shows how the combination of fear and hope surrounding childbirth was pretty monumental in medieval society and culture. And considering childbirth was believed to be the main cause of death to women in the Middle Ages, it really makes sense that they would try anything they could get their hands on for a safe pregnancy and delivery. Even after reformists tried to ban these charms, many women continued to wear things like birthing girdles and use vocal charms to aid in their pregnancies. Plus, when you think about it, birthright meant basically everything back then. Monarchies, property, and even religious authority, it was all connected to genealogy. So securing a healthy heir meant everything. I really like this next quote. I think it sums up folk medicine quite a bit. In the words of Thomas R. Forbes, professor of anatomy, medical historians have not often concerned themselves with folk medicine. It was, after all, the product of superstition, hearsay, ignorance, and, at best, crude empiricism. And its development was usually far removed from the intellectual mainstream of medical history. However, it must be remembered that during the Middle Ages and until the 18th century at least, good medical care, as it was then understood, was not available to great numbers of people because of poverty, tradition, and a shortage of trained practitioners. The common man very often depended on folk medicine practiced by laymen. So that really goes to show why they needed it. Poverty, tradition, and a shortage of trained practitioners. And really, you just didn't go to the hospital back then. But you're probably thinking, Austin, what does this have to do with anything? Well, I think that will contextualize this next story because it really makes me wonder how we would have even understood something like this next and final story, let alone how we would have attempted to treat it back then. So if you recall that fetus from the ectopic pregnancy at the top of the episode and how it didn't make it to full term, the fetus in this next story somehow defied all the odds. This podcast is not a medical podcast or a medical anomalies podcast. It just so happens that people are born in the hospital and it requires a lot of medical intervention. But I felt like this next story was so crazy and so good. It could also be like featured in an episode of The Pit. It's so interesting. So this one goes out for anyone working in the medical field. August 2025, Los Angeles, California. Susie Lopez, a 41-year-old emergency nurse from Bakersfield, was scheduled to have a 22-pound ovarian cyst surgically removed since it was starting to give her pain. Doctors had been monitoring the large cyst since her 20s, deciding to leave it in place after removing her right ovary and a different cyst. She needed a CT scan, which required a pregnancy test first because of the radiation exposure, and surprisingly, this test came back positive. She thought it might have been a false positive since she knew she had a very large ovarian cyst that had been growing for years, and she also worried that the positive pregnancy test was possibly due to ovarian cancer. 3 days after the positive results, she broke the news to her husband, Andrew, during a late-night Dodgers game in LA. To them, it was by all accounts a miracle because they had been trying to have a second child for 17 years. Andrew said, "I just saw her face and she just looked like she wanted to weep and smile and cry at the same time." But soon after the game, she started to experience pain in her abdomen. Andrew drove her to Cedars-Sinai Hospital where she had dangerously high blood pressure. And after the doctors stabilized her, they ordered an MRI, blood work, and an ultrasound. This routine pregnancy test and her medical stay would change the course of her life. Dr. John Ozimek, who was director of labor and delivery, was stunned at these diagnostic images. It was clear that Susie had a 1 in a million ectopic pregnancy, and the 22-pound cyst, about the size of a basketball, took up so much space that her near full-term unborn baby was resting inside an amniotic sac in a small space in her abdomen, implanted on the sidewall of her pelvis near her liver. His tiny little butt was resting gently against her uterus. Dr. Ozimek said, "A pregnancy this far outside the uterus that continues to develop is almost unheard of." As the baby had grown, it slowly pushed the cyst forward, so it made sense that Susie only thought her cyst was growing, not that she was pregnant. And she never felt any kicking or experienced morning sickness. She was also used to irregular periods and abdominal discomfort. She and her husband even went on trips abroad, not realizing that she was pregnant. Many ectopic pregnancies have a high risk of catastrophic maternal bleeding and fetal death. Little did Susie know, her baby boy was on the way, so she was immediately prepped for emergency surgery. It took a team of 30 experts to pull off the surgery and the delivery. Crammed inside the operating room were maternal fetal medicine specialists, gynecological oncologists, nurses, anesthesiologists, and specially trained surgical technicians. So first, they delivered the baby, Ryu Lopez, weighing 8 pounds after 41 weeks. He was born with a full head of hair and very few health problems, all things considered. He was named after a baseball player and a character in the Street Fighter video game series, Ryu. Hadouken! Susie then began hemorrhaging very badly, but the medical team was well prepared. Throughout the operation to remove the cyst, they ended up having to replace almost all the blood in Susie's entire body. And the cyst, once removed, couldn't even fit inside the operation basin. Meanwhile, Ryu was put on a breathing tube for about a day, fearing his lungs hadn't developed properly. Fetal mortality can sometimes be as high as 90% in cases like this, and birth defects are seen in about 1 in 5 surviving babies. But after 2 weeks in the hospital, Ryu was perfectly fine. Dr. Sarah Dyanam said that Ryu defied all the odds, and Dr. John Ozimek said, I mean, this is really insane. Just a few months ago, Ryu's family said that he was still a happy and healthy baby, and Susie's husband Andrew called it a modern-day miracle, with Susie adding, I do believe in miracles. God gave us this gift, the best gift ever. It's really crazy to think that, in the year 1900, almost all births were at home. An estimated 95%. Within about half a century, that would drop to less than 1%. So I don't even know what the outcome would have been 100 years ago. But very happy to hear that Ryu is doing great. I thought that story was insane. Wow, what an episode. Not all episodes will be as meandering as this one. I want you guys to know that. But I definitely had fun with this one. And I want to start a little tradition going forward. I have this big shelf behind me if you're watching. And I want to be able to pick something off of this shelf that's a part of my library and connect it, relate it back to whatever we just covered. So this is going to be our little tradition. I'll just slip something off the shelf from my Empire of Dirt. And for this first episode, I wanted to go big. So the physical media for this episode, The Tree of Life, directed by Terrence Malick. This movie has had a profound effect on me, and it's a beautiful movie about really what it means to live and what it means to die. And as kind of ridiculous and pretentious as that sounds, really, Terrence Malick does the impossible. He truly does encapsulate life itself. When we question our existence, why we're here, what it all means, I've felt like connecting it to childbirth. It's kind of a mystery why childbirth even is a thing, right? It's kind of a miracle. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you start digging into it. But Tree of Life, this is my favorite movie of all time. It's also the greatest movie ever made. And if you disagree with me, you're wrong, and that's okay. It's a very polarizing movie. It's experimental, so I get why not a lot of people would like it. So it's okay if you don't like it. It's okay if you hate it. In the end, go comment why. Explain to me what you've found so repulsive about it, or if you were just lukewarm on it. That's okay too. And if you love it, definitely comment and hype it up, because I love this movie, and I promise I won't take it personally if you hate it. But really, this movie has made me reflect on my place in the world. It's made me reflect on the relationships I've had, the people that I love. It's made me question if there really is some form of greater force or, God, so to speak, at play within this infinite universe, something intelligent possibly, or something all powerful. I'm not sure, but this movie certainly raised a lot of questions within me. And it's honestly just rocked me to my core, if I'm being honest. Also, the use of sound in this movie, impeccable. And I'm assuming a lot of my listeners, a lot of you come just for the voice and to fall asleep, and it's soothing, because sonically, that's why you're here, which is a high compliment, because I love sound as well. The sound design in this movie, bar none. The use of score in this movie, unheard of. Unheard of. But really, I'd recommend, if you do watch it, try and watch it with a great sound system. Even if you just pop on some headphones or something, you'll get a kick out of it. But yeah, that is it for the physical media. I hope I hyped it up enough. The Tree of Life, Terrence Malick. And before I lose you, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't tune me out right now. I know everyone just clicks out when they hear this, but this is kind of a pivotal moment because this is the first episode. And if you want to go support the show and future episodes, please go subscribe to Doogie See God, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube. Anything and everything helps. If you're listening on Spotify, just go subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, go subscribe on Spotify, wherever. Anything can help. And then also, if you really, really want to help me out, go check out the Patreon, because this world is cruel and I need money to survive. And if I want to do this for a living, I'm not too proud to beg. So we're going to be doing some cool stuff over there on the Patreon. I haven't formulated everything quite yet, but I definitely want to do things like Q&As in the future. I definitely want to put some merch up there. But yes, anything would help at this rate, trying to get this show off the ground. So like I said, if you really want to go support the show, hit up that Patreon, go subscribe. Also go follow me on Instagram and the show on Instagram. That's where I'll be posting a lot of the shorter stuff, the videos where we're just, having fun, doing whatever. So come hang out. And also let me know in the comments if you guys have any topic suggestions, any story suggestions, whatever you want me to cover on here. I am all ears, really. I mean, as long as it fits the formula of the show, bizarre stories from across the world, I will do anything. And I mean anything. Not anything, but almost anything, as long as we're within the realm of reason here. And so that is it for episode 1. Thank you guys so much. And remember to always, when you're considering the miracle of childbirth, ask yourself this: do geese see God? Think about it.